Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we're going to be looking at Warhammer the Old World again. We're going to be doing a mass update. Now, I'm going to be recording this in a little bit of a different way. I'm actually going to be recording this on my computer live. It won't be live for you guys, but it'll be live for me. So if you notice me making any mistakes or anything like that, that's why. So we're going to be looking at Warhammer the Old World. So I've been kind of lacking on my updates with this, and there is a reason for that. It's simply because I'm not too invested in Warhammer Old World. I used to play it a lot, Warhammer Fantasy in high school, in college. But basically, when they axed the game, I stopped caring about it. Now that they're bringing it back, I've had a little bit of interest in it, I'm not going to lie. I think some of the mechanics are really good, and some of them aren't so good. So we talked about some stuff. We talked about shooting, which for the most part I think is fine, except for the rank and file shooting, which I think sucks. And I understand if people like that shooting sucks, but when you have things like artillery really performing super well, and then you have units like archers for the same points as the artillery unit not performing anywhere nearly as good, then I think that's a balance issue and that needs to be addressed. Okay, so let's look at some of the stuff that we haven't covered. So we've covered the fight phase. In general, I think this is good. Let's go ahead and cover morale. So right off the bat, I just want to say that in the past, morale has been pretty shit, to be real with you guys. Excuse my language, but it's been terrible. Morale has been very swingy, and it can often win or lose a game for somebody in a single turn. Sometimes the first turn, depending on how things go. So it looks like in Warhammer Old World now, it's a little bit different. So we talked about this a little bit before in the combat, but basically there's a much lower chance of you getting run down because of this mechanic. And that's break tests. So break tests are rolled if you roll lower than your leadership value, the modified leadership value. So you guys don't know, when you lose combat, you roll a leadership test at a modified value depending on how much you lost by. So if you roll lower than that modified value, you just give ground, so you fall back a couple of inches and you continue the fight. If you roll higher than the modified value, you fall back in good order, so you fall back a certain distance and then the enemy can follow up, and basically they count as charging again, which is much better than having the whole unit destroyed, this result would have basically meant that your whole unit was destroyed in the past. And then if you roll higher than the natural leadership of your unit, then you break and flee. So for lower leadership armies, this is going to happen more often. For higher leadership armies like dwarfs and high elves and things like that, it's going to happen less often. So your expensive units aren't going to be run down as often. So that's basically what they say here. So basically in the first case, so this is the natural roll higher than leadership, the break and flee, you roll 2d6, enemy rolls 2d6. If the chasing unit, the winning unit, catches them, the fleeing unit's destroyed. So basically you have to equal to or exceed that roll that they roll. If you fall back in good order, then you just, you fall back, but what it seems like here is you move a certain distance. They don't exactly say, but you move a certain distance and then the enemy counts as charging and you're not destroyed. And then giving ground is you just step 2 inches back and then the combat continues. So that's much better than it was before. So now you can have high leadership units actually staying and fighting in combat rather than just running from one bad morale check. They talk about psychology, fear, terror, stupidity, animosity, frenzy, unbreakable, stubborn, and hatred. These are psychological effects. They are now universal special rules for units. So fear basically forces a unit to take a leadership check. If it's failed, they suffer a -1 to hit. Not that big of a deal, right? This is different than it was in the past. In the past editions of Warhammer Fantasy, if you failed this test and you lost combat against a fear-causing unit, you needed double ones to be able to pass morale, which was impossible, essentially, a 1 out of 36 chance. And then if you didn't pass it, which you wouldn't, you would flee and then they could catch you and kill you. So theoretically, if you didn't have something like immune to psychology, you could have a unit of zombies or skeletons catch a really elite unit from one bad round of rolling and basically die. With terror, basically what it is when a terror unit causing unit charges you, if you fail it, you have to flee back. And it gives you a -1 penalty to the leadership characteristic when taking a break test. But again, the good thing about this is, right, natural higher than leadership, right? You're only going to break and flee if you roll higher than your natural leadership value. So anything else, and it's these two results, and you don't die. So that is good, and I commend the writers of Warhammer Old World for changing this to make it more balanced. The Dragon Ogre Shaggoth is the example unit they give you. I've always hated Dragon Ogre Shaggoths, or whatever. I've always, as a dwarf player, these guys were really fast. They're really hard hitting in combat. It seems like they're pretty good, but not as good as before. So it looks like they toned these monstrous units down a little bit. Armored Hide 2 just gives it basically heavy armor, I assume. So it essentially has heavy armor, which is not bad. Has magical weapons, which basically allow it to affect certain types of units. So units like Cairn rates or Hex rates or anything like that, ethereal units, normally couldn't be harmed with normal weapons, but if you have ensorcelled weapons, then you can probably harm those types of units. It's a large target, which gives you +1 to hit at range. So if you're trying to shoot somebody out of that requires a ballistic skill, this is a +1 to hit. It has stomp attacks, which means that when it charges in, it does a certain amount of attacks before it gets its regular attacks, which is 5. So this is separate. It has Storm Call, which is probably some sort of ability. It gives you some damage or something like that, like a little mini storm or something. It has Terror and has the Quickening Storm. Don't know what that does, but I assume it's some sort of ability. And again, the Shaggoth is actually a hero. So it's going to be an expensive monster. So the fact that it has this isn't surprising. Armor Bane 2 means that it's going to have -2 AP on all its attacks, in addition to whatever else it has, whatever weapons it's equipped with. Now, they give you an example of Frenzy. Frenzy is essentially a +1 attack. So you get an extra attack, and you also gain immunity from fear and terror. You can lose Frenzy, however. Frenzy is something that you lose, I believe, if you lose combat. So if you lose combat once, Frenzy's done. You don't get the attack, and you don't get immunity from fear and terror anymore. However, there are certain units, like Empire Flagellants, that keep Frenzy because they're unbreakable. So they never take break tests if they're unbreakable, and they'll never lose Frenzy. But there's also spells that cause Frenzy, and those will just last one round, it looks like, or until the end of the turn, right? And the casting value actually looks pretty high. Now, we actually know how casting works now, so I'll go into that in just a second, but this is basically a pretty high roll for a wizard. Your basic level 2 wizard will pass this on average rolls, but there's a good chance that it will fail as well. So it is a powerful ability. Frenzy gives you +1 attack and immune to psychology, essentially, and Hatred gives you reroll all hits. So those are powerful rules, but the casting value is higher, so it makes sense. Okay, let's take a look at Magic, because Magic was something that I was really looking forward to seeing, and I was actually very disappointed in previous editions' rendition of Magic. Okay, so we have the Magic here. So they tell us there's going to be 8 lores in the core rulebook, and each different army book might have a different lore specific to their faction, which is, how it was before. You have different spell categories. Enhancements are like buffs, hexes are debuffs, conveyance are, kind of utility type of spells, movement, transport spells, magic missiles or shooting attacks, magical vortexes or remains in play effects that, will stay in play across the battlefield. If any of you ever played Warhammer Total War, this would be like banishment, all the OP spells that you basically want to rush early on in the campaign so you could just destroy army after army. This is magical vortexes. Assailments are, see, this is not very specific. I don't know what this exactly means. These spells are deadly attacks that strike the foe without warning. That could be anything. Who knows? I guess it's probably assassination type things. right? Like precision attacks. That's what I would guess. That's what that is, but could be anything. Okay. They say it's in the combat phase, so I'm guessing that's what it is. But this description is not that it's not that detailed. Okay, so they give you a miscast. So if you roll your 2 dice and you roll double ones, you miscast and you roll on this table. The table is very debilitating. There's a big chance your wizard's just gonna die, right? So this one's the worst. If you roll a double one followed by a 2 to 4, summon magic breaks free, creating an ethereal tornado. Center a 5-inch blast over the wizard. So everything's packed together in Warhammer Fantasy. So that's going to kill your unit too. Every model, friend or foe, whose base lies underneath the template risks being hit, suffering a single hit. Strength 10 hit with an AP of -4. So that's going to basically kill anything. It's going to wound anything on 2s, and it's also going to just kill them if they don't have a ward save. So that's pretty insane. That's game ending right there. If you roll a double one with your wizard followed by another double one, that's it. That's also the reason why a lot of players won't put their wizards in expensive units. They'll put them in cheap units for this exact reason, because if this happens, you're dead. I've actually seen a lot of players just use their wizards outside of units and risk getting shot at just because of the fact, that you could miscast and kill your own unit. And, then they basically get less deadly, right? Center a 3-inch blast instead of a 5-inch blast, less strength and less AP. Still pretty powerful, though. Wizard suffers a single strength 4 hit, not that big of a deal. Wizard manages to control the magic. The spell is cast, however, you can't cast more spells. Power drain, you can't cast more spells. So basically the same thing, right? Oh, the spell is cast with a perfect invocation. So that means it can't be denied or dispelled. Which is pretty good. Like, that's the best result you can do. That's the best thing that can happen, actually. Okay. So they talk about dispelling, and of course they give us the example of the dwarfs, which are, they're really good at dispelling typically. So basically other wizards within 24, if they're level 3 and 4, within 18 if they're level 1 and 2, roll 2d6. You have to beat the casting roll to cancel the spell. So it's not equal to, it's beat. So you have to beat the roll. A double 6 will automatically dispel. A double 1 will mean you have to roll in the miscast table, which sucks. So I'm hoping dwarfs are actually immune to this, because it would really suck if dwarfs had to roll on this. It really wouldn't make much sense to me, especially since most dwarfs are just resistant to magic. But let's go ahead and scroll down. They say that dwarfs get a bonus to their Fated Dispel, so you can make 1 Fated Dispel per turn. If you don't have a wizard, you could just roll it normally. This is in addition to all the dispels that your wizards can do. So this actually looks like a pretty balanced way of doing magic. You have wizards that can dispel, and then you have wizards that can cast. And if you don't have wizards, you can still do it at least one time. And if you're an army like dwarfs that don't have any magic, my guess is that you would be able to do this maybe more times or with a bonus. And if you have runesmiths, like they say here, yeah, runesmiths are perfectly capable of making dispel attempts. So I'm guessing runesmiths can make dispel attempts just like spellcasters, right? Runesmiths are 18 inches, rune lords are 24. Which you probably want. If you're playing dwarves, you probably want at least one runesmith or a rune lord in your army. I always knew when I played dwarfs, I was running at least 2 runesmiths, just stacked with dispelling stuff because of how powerful magic is. But you might not need that in Old World, because magic doesn't seem super OP. So you might be able to get away with just having 1 runesmith. I have Damsel right here. They give you an example of a spellcaster. Spellcasters are typically pretty weak. They're not that tough. They're pretty easy to kill. They don't have that great of melee, but they are strong in other ways. And you can even see here, right? Like, this is an expensive model if you want to go all in and do a level 4, right? That's going to be expensive. That's going to be like easily close to 200 points when it's all said and done. So it is powerful, but it is expensive. Glory of the Lady, Blessings of the Lady, Lord of the Lady. So these are all just special rules that the handmaidens have, which, I mean, this is typical. I think they always did this. I think they always gave magic resistance out to their army. Um, the unicorn is the special mount that they get. So special mounts give you a certain amount of extra wounds sometimes. They also give you higher initiative values. Yeah, yeah, see. So oh no, this is just for the unicorn. So one thing about fantasy is that your mounts attack separately. So your mount, your unicorn mount is weapon skill 4, strength 4, initiative 5 to attack. So you're going to get those attacks in addition to whatever the damsel is getting, but you're not necessarily going to be striking at the same initiative. That's pretty good. I mean, that's a pretty good beguiling aura, countercharge, magical attack, stomp attack, swift stride, which I assume means you can move through terrain, right? Beguiling aura, I'm sure it's some sort of -1 to hit against it, so that's really useful to have on something that's very fragile, like the Handmaiden. That's pretty good. Then they give you some example spells. We've seen Hammer Hand. That's basically just 2d3 strength 4 hits with an AP of -2. Pretty good, pretty easy to cast. Glittering Robe. -1 modifier to any hit rolls made against the caster. So, it's funny. This is another reason why shooting is just so bad, because there's a lot of spells in the game that just make shooting harder. So, I mean, you could have a unit of like Dwarf Quarrelers, for example, hitting on 7s, 6s followed by 4s, or hitting on just 6s, up close. I mean, that's pretty insane. Like, that unit's not going to get a lot of value if you have something like this, right? And I'm not saying these shouldn't exist. I just think shooting should be a little bit more balanced so that rank and file units still have a purpose. And basically every game I've seen, whether it be a battle report on YouTube or a game between people playing older editions at the shop, whatever it is, every time somebody takes a rank and file range unit, they just take them with basically the minimum number, and that's it. And they just kind of sit them in the back and just use them to like whittle down ranks and stuff. But they're never really effective, They're always less effective than just having more of something else, like I've never actually seen range units make up their points in any game. Well, those kind of rank and file range units. Not cannons, because yeah, cannons can easily make up their points worth, and pretty much any dwarf or empire artillery can do the same thing. Stormcall, that is pretty cool. Looks like a hex, -1 modifier to movement and initiative. That's pretty cool. So that's a cool spell. So it looks like magic is, they say it's simplified. It does seem more simple than, having all the power dice and spell dice and stuff like that. So that is good. We'll just have to see what different armies get. Like, I could very much see, like, if runesmiths don't really get anything like that spectacular, I could see dwarfs being a little bit weaker in that regard, but still pretty good. I still think it's a balanced system, and magic looks good, which is good. And again, I'm not anti-fantasy. I'm very wary of Old World because of the things and the choices that GW made in the past in regards to this game. Okay, let's go and look at universal special rules. I just wanted to look at quickly through this stuff because I think this stuff is interesting. I mean, fantasy is, whether I like it or not, really, at the end of the day, I do like the concept, and I do like rank and file miniature games. So they show us some Grail Guardians. Now, Grail Guardians were always like this really like super elite OP unit, and they look like the same thing, right? The Grail Knights and the Grail Guardian. Grail Guardian is the champion of the unit, so it's not like Warhammer Total War where they're their own unit. It's just Grail Knights, and then the Grail Guardian is the unit champ. So these guys are really good. Weapon skill 6, they hit very easily, they have 2 attacks apiece. If they charge into you, they're going to do a lot of damage, especially with lances. So lances, they get bonus strength, and I think they get armor bane on charge. But I mean, oh, here we go. Yes. So they give you extra strength, +2 on the charge, so you're striking at strength 6. And it's at AP -2 with armor bane 1, so that's AP -3 in total. So if you have heavy armor and a shield, you're at 3+. You're only going to get a 6+ save against a lance on charge. So like even dwarf warriors, who are some of the most heavily armored in the game, with shields, they're going to only save on a 6 against these guys. So these guys are pretty good. They have some really great abilities. Swift Stride, I think, means they can move through terrain. Again, don't quote me, but Living Saints, I think, is like they don't suffer modifiers or something like that. Yeah, and there's just like different things here. Like I can't tell you all of this stuff, but lance formation gives them bonuses when they charge in and stuff like that. Okay. To give you an example of what close order is, it's basically just how models rank up. It's kind of cool. Well, I mean, this is just a word for the basic unit, right? And then different units might have different like things like skirmishers are different in the way you deploy them, and so are um, Bretonians because they have this lance formation, right? So they could do close order or they could do lance formation, and I'm sure you choose that before the battle starts, and I'm sure it's something like if you want to change it, you're gonna have to spend part of your activation doing that. Like you're not gonna be able to change it and then charge in the same turn, stuff like that. Look at this peasant just getting freaking eaten by this. I don't even know what this is, demon of chaos or something. Just getting just totally wrecked down there. Special rules for the lady. You know what I find funny is like this artwork is so hilarious to me. You have this dude, this like this I don't know, this questing knight or something. He's going on this great quest. Oh, beseech me with the blessing of the lady, and then like I don't know what the lore is on these things, like the lady of the lake, but I'm pretty sure she's like a demon or something. I can't exactly remember. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I'm pretty sure it's like part irony that like Grey Knights are following this like thing, and it's actually like a kind of a demented vengeful spirit or something like that. This reminds me a lot of The Witcher, actually. Like if you guys like the Witcher series, like Bretonians are probably close to what you would like. More Bretonian stuff, finest war horses. Okay, okay, cool. You may reroll any ones when you charge, flee, or pursue before discarding any dice. Okay, so that means that the warhorses themselves and the attacks that the warhorses get to reroll ones to hit, which is good on the charge. That's really good. If their first charge of the game makes contact, the target unit loses its rank bonus. Wow. Um, Lance formation allows Bretonian knights to form the signature devastating charge formation, which I'm sure gives them bonuses. So I'm just going to tell you guys right now, just looking at all these stacking rules that Bretonians get for their horses, they're going to be super strong. There might not even be much of a reason to include anything but war horses in your army, unless you're just like just stacking peasants to just hold enemies in place with spears or something like that, and just hold enemies in place, and then hit them on the flanks with these Bretonian knights, which is kind of how they played before anyway. All right, living saints. That they can individually issue challenges to enemy characters. That's really useful. That means if you lose a unit champion, you don't have to worry about not being able to accept challenges. If you decline a challenge, by the way, one of your models has to go to the back rank. And if it's, it has to be a character too. So Living Saints is a great way of preventing your more expensive characters from actually dying, like the Prophetess and stuff like that. Grail Vow, immune to fear and terror, fight with magical attacks. The first time they fail a break test, they automatically fall back in good order. I would say that the Bretonians are kind of like the Space Marines of fantasy. Like if you have a power fantasy about like running a bunch of Terminators and stuff like that in 40k, I'm sure the Bretonians are going to fit that for you. Obviously it's a rank and file game, so it's a little different. But I mean, they seem really tough. They're really hard hitting. They have really good leadership. They're just basically good at everything. But of course, they're going to be very expensive as a result. So you might only be able to use like one or two units of these guys, and you'll have to fill out the rest of your army with peasants to get their numbers, which is typical. I mean, that's how Bretonians always kind of were. Actually, I remember this one guy. He ran nothing but knights, and his whole army of 3,000 points was four big units of knights. He had Knights of the Realm, Knights Errant, um, questing knights, and I think he had Grail knights too, and that was his whole list. Virtue of the Impetuous Knight. Okay, so these are virtues, which are upgrades that the units get. So pretty cool. Blazing Banner has flaming attack. Yeah, so you can really kit these guys out and make them super strong, but they're also really expensive. So yeah, they may be able to just destroy unit after unit, but chances are 2 or 3 units are also going to be cheaper than just one big unit of knights. So you do have to use them carefully, and if you're not careful, you might end up on the wrong side of an organ gun or something like that, or a devastating spell. Okay, cool. So that's really cool. I think the Bretonian rules look pretty awesome. Obviously 38 points a model, that's not accounting for all the upgrades. So these guys are expensive. I mean, it's 40 points a model essentially if you give them shields. Do they have shields? Yeah, they have shields. Okay, so never mind. They come with shields, so the 38 points coming with shields. But you know, these upgrades here, they're probably going to take a knightly virtue, right? They're probably going to take a magical standard, so that becomes really expensive. So these guys are really super elite. They hit hard, they're really fast, but they're a lot of points. All right. So let's go into army selection. I haven't actually read this yet. I've read most of this stuff on my own, but I haven't read army selection. So oh, cool, dwarves, and of course the handgunners are one of the worst. God, I mean I don't know about now, but they were one of the worst units in the dwarf army book. They were super expensive. They were more expensive than a hammer, and they just didn't do anything. Okay, I know I complain a lot about that, but handgunners were one of the first units I really invested in as a new player because they look so cool and the descriptions were so cool and everything, and then I just found out they just sucked, and it was just such a shame. Okay, so it looks like basically it's the same thing as before. You have characters, you have core, which is like your troops. Your characters are like what we have today in 40k, farseers, warlocks, stuff like that. Special are like your elites. So specials like your swooping hawks, striking scorpions, stuff like that. And your rares like your super rare units, right? Very unusual models, or models that are extremely powerful. So they'd be like your fire prisms or something like that, right? And then you can looks like some armies can have mercenaries and allies, which is interesting. Um, Interesting. Okay. Not sure what that is, but I'm sure it has something to do with the order versus the order versus the disorder. Like Empire and dwarfs can ally together, or whatever, right? Interesting, but I kind of don't like this. I really don't like this. In fact, I think allies, any system with allies, usually, unless they're from the same army, like orcs and goblins, for example, like it makes sense because they're part of the greenskin faction, right? But it doesn't really make much sense with other things. Like, I don't really like this, but we'll see how they do it. But that's something I don't like at all. Mercenaries, that makes sense. They've had mercenaries in the past, regiments of renown, stuff like that. So that's cool. But yeah, allies, nah, don't like it. Every army, oh, look at this. Every faction will have a grand army upon release. A balanced list of options from which you can pick a wide variety of units. Oh, okay, never mind. I thought they meant that there was going to be kits for every single army. Hopefully that's the case. Hopefully every single army gets a bundle of models that you can buy. So okay, so I was wrong. So this does not mean that every faction is guaranteed to have an army box. It just means that every army has a roster of units that they can choose from. So characters, up to 50% of your army can be spent on characters. At least 25% has to be core. So you have to have core units in your army, which makes sense. You need your rank and file. Special units can be up to 50% of your army. Rare can only be up to 25% of your army. You can take 20% of mercenaries, which is kind of cool. Bretonians can take mercenaries, which makes sense. I mean, if you look at their, the map on Total War, they're right next to, some of the, like, Talea and Astalia. So, like, those are, like, the big mercenary, the big mercenary nations, right? Allies, up to 25%. See, this is not good. So I don't like this ally system, but let's see what it is. So Up to 25% of your army's points may be spent on allies, a single allied contingent, so you can't make multiple allies. Any Kingdom of Bretonian army of infamy composition list. One of the Fallen Grain army composition lists. Okay, so you can. Looks like you take dwarven mountain holds, but the dwarfs are suspicious. that's so dwarf right there to be suspicious of the manlings. Like we'll help you, but we don't like you. You know, Empire of Man, who they're not suspicious of for some reason. High Elf Realms, who also they're not suspicious of, which I mean that kind of makes sense a little bit, but because they're like right next to each other. Wood Elf Realms is suspicious. See, here's the thing: the Wood Elves, I gotta be real. I mean, based on the lore, it doesn't seem like the Wood Elves are really friends with anybody. They're very isolationist, and they would only ally with somebody in the direst of circumstances. So I actually think this is bullshit. I don't think Wood Elves should be allowed to ally with them at all. And dwarfs, I mean, very rare that a dwarven hold would actually ally themselves with Bretonians. Um, I know there are a few dwarf holds near, the mountains of Bretonia and stuff, but still, dwarfs don't really like helping out Bretonians. In fact, I'm pretty sure dwarfs find them, full of themselves, which is funny because they kind of are. I mean, look at these guys. Yeah. Anyway, okay, so I don't like this ally system. I know this might be an unpopular opinion. I don't care. I don't like allies. I don't think it's a good idea to have allies. I don't think it truly adds anything to the game. It's just a way for GW to make more money by offering people the opportunity to buy other armies and incorporate them into the army they already have. I find that it has no actual value. So that sucks, but hopefully it's not some broken mechanic where I mean, just imagine taking some dwarfs with your army of Breton and just having a bunch of dwarven artillery with like Bretonian cavalry, like you have an unstoppable list. I don't know about that. Or imagine taking dwarfs with like Empire allies and having like Empire knights as your like fast cav. Like I understand like why that they would put that in there so that like armies have options. But come on. I mean, there's other ways to do that to make sure that every faction has something good without having to include allies. Okay, they just talk about the different percentages. Lords of Bretonia. So here we go. So here are the heroes of Bretonia. You have the Duke, which is the most expensive lord. You have the Baron, which is like the budget lord option, and then you have a Paladin, which is a hero. Interesting. Okay, so it looks like it's the same system as before. You have to pay for your war gear. You have to pay for your vows. You have to pay for your items, which is really cool. So I like this system. I think it's really quite a good system as far as like points balance and points and balance go. So that's cool. This asshole right here, he's just like has all of his like peasant like followers, following him around. It's like he like killed this troll and he's like, oh, now carry the troll's head for my glory. Fucking Bretonians. Bretonians are so pompous. Okay, the Hippogriff. Oh, cool. Okay, the Hippogriff is the monstrous flying cavalry that the Bretonians have. Pretty cool. Great strength, gives them +1 toughness, +3 wounds. Wow, so makes the Lord really powerful. So I think only Lords and like heroes can like actually mount this thing, but it's really powerful. And it can have Barding for 15 points, which I believe gives it +1 armor. Griffonic Pelt, which counts as heavy armor. Okay, so they have heavy armor, then they have Barding, which is +1. Okay, pretty cool. They have Scaly Skin. No, doesn't. Okay. Oh, cool. They gave us the Men-at-Arms stat line. Okay, so check this out. So this is the Bretonian infantry, right? So imagine all that OP Bretonian cavalry stuff that we're talking about, like super strong Bretonian infantry, weapon skill 2, ballistic skill 2, strength. They suck, right? And of course, looks like they have hand weapons, they have pole arms, light armor, and shield. So actually not bad. This is a pretty good selection of equipment. They're a horde. I don't know what that means. It probably means they don't get some sort of like bonus. Levies, peasantry, shield wall, warband. Yeah. I mean, these are probably really bad. I mean, they're probably only good for holding. Leadership 5, so they flee really easily. and weapon skill, ballistic skill 2. So that means their archers are hitting on 5s base, and probably most of the time 6s. So that's what I was talking about earlier when I was talking about rank and file infantry being terrible. Like most rank and file infantry of the shooting variant is going to have ballistic skill 2 or ballistic skill 3 at the most, and you're oftentimes paying more points for that. So they don't show us points here. They don't show us the points per model, but they do show us the points of the champion. So typically, if the champion's 7 points, in my experience, okay, so here's the thing, right? In my experience, the champion was always more points than the actual model. So it looks like if it upgrades here, I would guess, this is my guess, is that men-at-arms cost 5 points a model. And archers probably cost 7 or 6 points a model, which my guess would be 7 is for an archer if it has a bow. And that's just not going to be that great. It's just not going to be cost effective for what you're getting. You're only killing like one model. You know, you're spending 70 points on the unit, you're killing one model a turn. Nah, probably going to suck. I don't know, though. I don't know the points. I mean, if they're cheaper than that, if the archers are like 4 points a model, then maybe they would be worth it. Shield wall, which allows them to give ground instead of falling back. See, that's really cool. Shield wall is cool, but here's the problem with this ability, right? Is that they're leadership 5. So they're, well, I mean, really, right? 6, right? Because you're going to have the unit champion if it's alive. So that means you have to roll a 6 or under to not break and flee. If you roll over a 6 at any point, you're breaking and fleeing and you could get run down. So yeah, shield wall will help you if you pass your base leadership value. Like if you roll a 6 or under, shield wall is great, but if you roll over it, it's not good. Grail Monk acts as kind of second champion who's plus Trooper will prevent a whole unit stubborn. Okay, so the first time they're required to take a break test, they don't need to risk a dice roll. Instead, they fall back in good order. Okay, that's pretty cool. So stubborn is you basically pass your first failed morale check automatically. You don't need to take it, which is good. That's a really good ability on a unit like this. It means that these guys are definitely a holding unit, and these guys will be useful. Okay, I just noticed this. The Grail Monk is literally this fat dude right here. It looks like he's this guy right here, right? He's this like fat dude, this like bald monk head. That's epic. That's so epic. Okay. Um, Grand Army is not the only way to select a force. Each faction will gradually gain access to armies of infamy, which will provide widely different ways to muster force. The Bretonian you might enter exile. It means you can take forbidden border princes, bombards in battle. Really just enjoy knights and more knights. Oh, interesting. Okay. So it looks like there can be different ways to build an army. Like you don't have to. Okay, so here's the thing, right? This is the typical way to build an army. And then there's going to be different ways to build an army that come out later, kind of like detachments, which is cool. I think that's a really cool idea. Again, I don't like the allies. I think this is a mistake. I definitely agree that like armies of renown should be a thing, but like I just don't like the ally system. I don't like it for any army to just pick up 25% of their force as allies. I think it should be much less than that. I think it should be actually less, maybe 15%. 25% is a lot, right? Like if I can take 500 points worth of dwarf artillery, like I'm taking that dwarf artillery in every game. I'm not going to bother with trebuchets. I'm going to pick up organ guns, you know? I mean, but again, I don't know how good organ guns are going to be, but so that's interesting. So I think there's a lot of interesting things here. Really the only thing I didn't like, again, was the rank and file shooting, which I think is going to be bad. I know people say it's supposed to be bad, but my argument to that is if it's supposed to be bad, then why is it even in the game to begin with? You might as well just not have it in the game or have it, provide some other type of function like, shoot rank and file shooting, all shooting units that, if you fire more than a certain number of missiles in the unit, like if you fire 10 or more missiles, maybe the unit that you're targeting has to take a leadership check or be suppressed so that you're at -1 to your movement value and -1 to your initiative, which would make sense, right? It's because when you're having arrows being shot at you, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to put up your shield, you're going to duck, you're going to it's going to slow you down, right? It's going to make you slower to react to charges and things like that, which is often what archers were used for, right? To like shoot as an enemy was coming in, whittle the ranks down, make them, kind of, you know, give them a little bit of a scare and also like slow them down, right? So that your own infantry could have the advantage once you started to fight in close combat. Because I mean, most infantry is going to have shields, so shields, depending on how big they are, but most trained infantry can put up their shields and block most incoming fire, but it's going to slow you down. So this is really cool. I think these are good changes for the most part. I think Warhammer Old World looks to be off to a good start. There's two things I really hate about it so far. Again, rank and file shooting still sucks. Um, and this, oh man, I know I've complained about this a lot, but this ally system, oh my god, it's gonna be abused. Just watch. It will be abused, and GW will have to address this somehow because there's just going to be combinations that are too powerful within fantasy, Warhammer Fantasy. So hopefully they balance things with this in mind, but I'm not convinced. I'm going to have to see it in person to kind of understand that a little better. So yeah, that's going to be it for today. As far as Warhammer Old World goes, I'll probably continue coverage every once in a while just because, it is interesting. It is a game that I've played a lot as a kid. Well, as an adult too, young adult, until they axe the game. So I think that could be really cool. I'm really excited to see what they come out with the different army boxes. I took a look at the Tomb King's army box. I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed at all, actually. Maybe they showed it. Let's see. Where's Old World? Here it is. Did they show the army box? I don't think they did. No, they just showed this like character or whatever. So that was just a leak. Like GW's not going to release that. Oh well. Well, anyway, I wasn't impressed with it. I liked all the models except for, of course, it came with a bunch of our skeleton archers, which everybody knows are terrible. So, I think if every faction's like that and every faction is going to get like a terrible rank and file range unit, I think those boxes are probably better off left at home unless you really like the aesthetic of a ranged unit, which they look cool, like dwarf handgunners look cool, like empire handgunners, they all look cool, but they're just not that good in game. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today. Just wanted to cover that really quick and try out some different stuff as far as streaming goes. I'm trying to get back into streaming and make it a little bit better. I've installed OBS, so hopefully that's going to give us a better streaming experience and recording experience for these types of videos. So, yeah, anyway, fingers crossed. All right, everybody, peace out. I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good one.